Hi, I'm Matthew Hanson. I'm the Director of New Ventures at UC Irvine Beall Applied Innovation. And this is Orange County Celebrates Entrepreneurs, where we put a spotlight on the region's most inspiring entrepreneurs who are helping improve the quality of our life as well as helping us grow our economy. And today's inspiring entrepreneur is Shaun White. He is the, I lost it there. Shaun White, Director of Research and Technology at Medtronic. He was formerly the CEO and co-founder of Laser Associated Sciences, and he's going to walk us through what it's like to go through an exit. Welcome, Shaun.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Super. Let's dive right in. So describe for us the company you founded, Laser Associated Sciences, and how you positioned it for an acquisition, starting with, did you actually plan to do that? Or was this an evolution? Was there a process behind it? Did it all happen at the last minute? Walk us through that a little.
Sure. So Laser Associated Sciences was a company which was founded to develop a really specific technology, and that was a non-invasive way of trying to measure blood flow in the limbs. The reason we were doing that is because, as simple as that might sound, for patients who have blockages in the arteries, so for patients with peripheral artery disease, we have relatively effective ways for treating those patients, but we don't have effective ways to show that those interventions are working in real time. And so what that means is patients can undergo a procedure, but there's ambiguity to a clinician as to whether or not it's effective at the time of the procedure. And so you're waiting a couple of months to actually get the result to know. And so what we wanted to provide was real-time feedback to let a clinician know that what they were doing was actually having the intended effect. And I think from the get-go, we had always envisioned that we wanted to build Laser Associated Sciences for an acquisition. And the reason behind that was the co-founders of the business are all scientists and engineers by training. And I think what that meant was we knew what our strengths were, and we wanted to play to those strengths. And so we brought some degree of technical expertise to the table, and what we didn't have, we tried to bring in, so expertise in quality, clinical, regulatory, etc. But what we wanted to do was leverage, I think, what we had. And we knew that we could build a really strong value proposition around the technology, show that it works, demonstrate that clinically, and get through some early regulatory hurdles. But we didn't ultimately want to, if we didn't have to, reinvent the wheel by bringing up and building a huge marketing campaign, a sales team, etc. We knew that we wanted to, if we could, leverage that strength that existed in a lot of the strategics in our space. And so for that reason, we always envisioned that that was going to be our best path forward, unless we had to shift gears. And I think the way that we built the company to try and position ourselves for that acquisition was really sort of how the gears in our own heads, again, scientists and engineers by training, how they turned, which was we were always very data-driven from the beginning because we were technical people. And so we always approached building the business as needing to always show the burden of proof. So from the very beginning, we were building proof of principle, working prototypes. We were going out and trying to collect both the benchtop and the clinical data to show that the technology did what we were indeed trying to show. And so the way that we were trying to build up that story was always with objective proof. And then by trying to tie in as tightly as we could with the key opinion leaders in our space, so that not only were we able to tell the story from a technical perspective, but we were also able to lean on the key opinion leaders to kind of bridge that gap in conversation between us as a company and some of the strategics in the space, to let someone else besides us be able to sell the story and the value.
So were you in discussions with multiple larger companies in your sector, or did you always have an eye on Medtronic? Did Medtronic approach you? How did that relationship start?
We, from the get-go, we wanted to open the door to whoever might be interested in our technology. So there were a few strategics in our space where there could have been an appropriate fit. And I think Medtronic was really a front runner for us because their alignment from both a strategy perspective and from a product portfolio really fit with what we were doing. So although the door was always open, they were certainly a leading candidate for us. But that conversation didn't happen right off the bat. We had to go through quite a bit of, again, that benchtop clinical validation to really get the message out and to make the conversations meaningful. And so it's not that we couldn't have had the conversation earlier. It's that we ourselves wanted to build a lot of that value in the company before we went out and started to try and have those conversations. So when we did, they were impactful, and we wouldn't be left with this, keep us in the loop and let us know how it goes. There's certainly value in that. But I think we had a pretty unique opportunity that our technology didn't require a huge amount of capital to get some of that proof of concept and proof of principle data. So we wanted to take the initiative to do that, to make sure that we could tell an effective story from the get-go.
You talked about strategic fit, and that's usually really gets down to the details of that when you get into due diligence. So walk us through that due diligence process. How did the two of your organizations reach agreement that there was the strategic fit?
It's a great question. So there's the official due diligence process itself, which I don't know if there's anything distinctly different from Medtronic's view of due diligence. It's going through and looking at all the cross-functional contributors to trying to burn down risks. So all of the technological risks, the regulatory risks, the quality risks that you see, particularly in small businesses, to make sure that when we take this business on, that there aren't skeletons in the closet and there aren't significant problems with trying to take a DHF, which is built by a small team, and make it into something more appropriate for a large company. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I think where the due diligence process really took hold was before any of that actually happened. Because leading up to that conversation, and conversation is a bit generous because this went on for months, obviously. Leading up to that, though, were all those initial conversations between us and whoever the cross-functional team members were at Medtronic, who were there to learn about the technology and become our champions internally. So those were people at Medtronic itself. Those were key opinion leaders that we interacted with. But when we get to diligence, ultimately, if everything was done right, everyone wants diligence to be successful. And so there's a ton of technical questions to answer, but everyone's just looking out for those skeletons in the closet. In general, people want to close the deal. So really, I think where the rubber met the road in terms of trying to meet what we needed to meet to check that box for diligence, mm-hmm. was making sure that we had people internally at Medtronic who believed in the technology, who could tell the story, who knew us as an LAS, the company, and the people behind it, knew that we were passionate, and knew that what we were saying was valid and truthful, and that we really did have the data and the knowledge to back up what we said. And that kind of relationship building, I think, is really, at the end of the day, what pushed us over the edge. So checking some of those due diligence boxes, I almost feel was either as important or sometimes almost secondary to building the relationship, so that someone can, at the end of the day, put their neck out there at that strategic acquirer and say, this is the right decision, and I'm willing to represent and become a champion to make that decision.
I appreciate your highlighting the very human element that goes into this, right? There's culture, there's trust, there's expectations. All of that has both risks and benefits associated with us. So if you were to go back in time to when you started LAS, what would you tell your younger self? What was the one thing you'd tell your younger self about preparing and having risks reduced by the time you reached an acquisition point?
That's a fantastic question. I think one of the struggles we had from the get-go is we had the technology, again, to measure blood flow, and the number of applications that we envisioned for that technology were really broad. And we spent quite a bit of time, I think, on trying to narrow down on a real specific focus in application. And that's actually how we became aligned with Medtronic. Is they were very interested in intraprocedural monitoring, so looking at blood flow during procedures. And that is ultimately where we sort of focused down on over time, is what the right application of our technology was. But it took us a while to get there because there were so many interesting application spaces that we thought there was an opportunity, that we wanted to look into all of them. And this is sort of the curse of the engineer. You want to do it all. And ultimately, I think that we could have benefited a little bit earlier by being more focused on one particular application, but making sure that we could succinctly and articulately explain what the pathway, what the open road downstream was going to be for our technology. So to say, we know what we're doing today, and here's all the data to support it, but also we have a pipeline, and here's what it is, and here's the timeline, and here's how we're going to achieve it. Having that focus, though, I think is critically important, because you can't be the jack of all trades, but you need to have a vision. And I'm going to cheat and add a second answer to your one question, which is, I think we also benefited from exactly what you articulated earlier, which was just the human element. We always tried to be very just truthful and honest and frank with what we had, where the shortcomings were, what the strengths were, to make sure that we could highlight those as well. But I think that's how we built trust with the people that we interacted with at Medtronic, and ultimately what got people on board with us as a company and the acquisition. And part of the reason is, if you want to go out there and show nothing but the bright sparkles and don't want to open the kimono at least a little bit, people who are part of these big strategics, they've seen it 1,000 times before. So if you're not going to be honest, that will come through. If not right off the bat, eventually it will. And I think avoiding that was a strong advantage for us, to make sure that people could trust us, understand us, and that we could have an open and frank conversation where it wasn't gamesmanship. It was us working towards a mutual cause together.
And when you meet that mutual cause and mutual benefit, you consummated the corporate marriage, if you will. But then tell us what it was like, both personally and professionally, both for you and your team. How did you celebrate? What were your feelings? Give us that angle on it.
Yeah, so of course, it felt fantastic. The truth was that, as I said earlier, when you're going through that diligence process, provided everything works the way you want, you're really hoping that nothing comes up as a skeleton in the closet. There's no bumps in the road, and that everyone wants to make it happen. And so you already have a vision that it's going to close. And so when it finally did, and we came to the end of a very long road, it almost felt like as much of a sigh of relief as a victory. But of course, it was very satisfying, because this was a passion project. The co-founders, and we were a small team, we had worked on for many years. And as we did that, we gave up a lot of time. We had a lot of support from our significant others, our wives and girlfriends. And so the first thing we did was try and make good on that. So we finally took a full weekend off. We went out to a nice restaurant, and we brought along the most impactful people in the whole process, our significant others, and we had a great celebratory dinner, just to be a representation, I think, of all the work, not only we, but all the people in the background who make this sort of thing feasible to make it happen. And then on Monday, we went back to our desks and we started breaking more rocks. But it was a good 2 days off.
I had to laugh when you said you got a weekend off. It's as normal. No, that's exciting. And for you, the celebration continued in the sense that you then moved over with the activity into Medtronic.
Yeah, that's right. We had a relatively small team, and the entirety of the full-time employees at Laser Associated Sciences all moved on to Medtronic. So we continue to work on the technology, and it's been a really satisfying endeavor for us because, again, we wanted to build this technology in this company so it could ultimately be acquired. Mm-hmm. But it was only because the clinical and patient risk that a big entity like Medtronic enables us to get the penetration of the market that we always wanted. And so being a part of Medtronic and now seeing that through fruition, that's the second part of the journey here and a huge component of it. And so that's what we're working on the day-to-day now. And I think we've had some good success, and we'll continue to kind of push and work hard on that to see more of it.
Well, and best wishes for continued success, because I know this is still all very fresh. I mean, the acquisition was just last year. Is that correct?
That's right.
And then speaking of successful exits, we're actually out of time, and I need to exit. So I'm going to say thank you, Sean, for sharing your insights and information with us. It's very encouraging to see the arc of your career and growing this company and having that successful exit. And I want to thank all of you out there for watching. More importantly, I encourage you to model Sean and pursue your dreams, build on them, break a few rocks, take a weekend off every 10 years. And enjoy the journey. Everybody, take care and have success. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Hi, and welcome to Orange County Celebrates Entrepreneurs, where we put a spotlight on the region's most exceptional entrepreneurs who are helping improve our daily lives, but also helping grow our economy. I'm Matthew Hanson. I'm the Director of New Ventures at UC Irvine Beall Applied Innovation. And today, my guest is Pamina Barkow, former co-founder and CEO of Orange County Pain Management. In the context of the harvest stage of a startup, she's going to share with us her insights and experiences in the theme of you can never accomplish something alone. So she'll share with us her ideas and thoughts about that. But first, let me introduce Pamina Barkow. Welcome today.
Hi.
Hi. So we'll just kick right off here. Describe the company you co-founded, Orange County Pain Management, and how did you position it to be acquired? That is, did you even think of it, or is this something that evolved over time? And I got to squeeze an extra question in here. What does this have to do with going to chef school?
That's a great question. Orange County Pain Management was founded in 2008 by my late husband and I. When he and I met, yes, I was in chef school, I was in clinical nutrition school, and I had this idea. I was always very entrepreneurial, and I wanted to take this idea of people with highly sensitive disease states and teach them how to eat. And when I met my physician husband, he was a pain management physician, and he was ready to leave the partners that he was with. Mm-hmm. And we thought, hey, why don't we start something in which we combine those two thoughts, in which we combine, he can do the pain management aspect, and I can do managed care in terms of taking that patient population, working with them at a deeper level in terms of their daily habits. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can come up with something that's a little bit innovative and different, and that stimulates both of us, and we can do it jointly. And out of that, we started a clinic. We just had one part-time receptionist, and off we went. No, we were not thinking acquisition back then, not even close. But at least I got to how chefdom weaved into that equation.
Sure, that raises an interesting question then. At what point did you realize there was an opportunity to exit, and what prompted that?
In 2018, my husband got very ill. And I had been the CEO at that point. I realized quickly I loved the administration side of this business. I love the business of business. And I had gone and got my MBA, and I had already been structuring our business for growth. When he got ill in 2018 is when I started to really think about, could we have an exit here? Because I already had several sort of spin-off companies that I wanted to play around with. And I thought, maybe we can sell this and, I can work on spinning off, a couple of these other companies. So at that point, I started to look around. I even met with a couple brokers that said, oh, it takes forever and it's hard. You're not going to be able to sell, a private practice. And they really dissuaded me from it at the time. So, but it was later in 2018, my husband passed away, and I'm not a physician, so I can't own our clinics. And it really made me think about, what do I want? All of a sudden I had 3 companies, large companies, come to me and say, hey, we'll acquire you for peanuts, of course, because your medical director passed away. And so you should be grateful that we're even giving you an offer. I'm really grateful for, my education and my MBA, and saying, I don't think so. I think we can do this a different way. And I wasn't ready for merger and acquisition then, even though I did go through diligence with a couple of those companies. But at the end of the day, it just didn't sit right with me. So, you can see 3 years later it did. But, I started to explore it 3 years ago. So I was fully aware of, okay, it's going to be a process. I'm going to want, a couple different people courting me. It's going to require a lot of work on my end, and I want the deal to feel right. But, that process was it was a 3-year process.
Did you have outside advisors helping you navigate this exploration of a strategic acquisition?
I did not at the beginning. At the beginning, it was just sort of, me exploring options. I will say that for my actual merger and acquisition, which took nearly a year, I did have, I had a merger and acquisitions lawyer. Okay. And we can talk about what the role is, because it's very specific. It's not what people think. They don't go in there and negotiate terms for you. And then I'm very lucky to have a partner that's a former investment banker. And absolutely, I think, having him on the team, helping to push the ball forward in terms of helping to clarify the different roles that appear in merger and acquisitions, because it is complex, and how best to approach certain aspects of it is really quite helpful. So yes, I did have 2 anchors on my team that were very familiar with merger and acquisition process and helped advise me. Okay,
wonderful. So you enter the process, and the organization's Physician Partners of America, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Describe for us what that due diligence process was like. How did you work with them to ensure that your enterprise was a fit for them? And what did they go through to make sure that that was true?
Yeah, the first thing that we did was we had a lot of conversations. And I do want to preface this by saying that the large organizations all have merger and acquisition teams. They have a VP of merger acquisitions. They will have, people that are very used to due diligence. They'll have in-house counsel. So they are highly equipped and skilled at going in, evaluating a company and seeing if it's a good fit for them. Yeah. What I think we entrepreneurs are not skilled at is we don't have an in-house team for this. We haven't been through this necessarily. And so the due diligence on both sides is really quite different. On my end, it was interesting. When they came in, I was in negotiations with a different group. And through that due diligence, there was just part of me that felt like they're not the right group in terms of having a great fit for my, employees, a cultural fit. As the due diligence went along, it got a little harder to communicate with them. And I realized this is, this is like a marriage. Like, this has to be a great fit culturally.
Right.
When Physician Partners of America came in, I really liked that they had a whole department devoted to customer care. They seemed very on top of the ball, and we were aligned in terms of how important both employees are and, patients are. And because of their sort of people focus, it felt like a natural fit. We talk the same language. I love organizational behavior, and to be able to talk to them about, what sorts of benefits do the employees get? What sorts of breaks can they get? How do you treat your employees on a daily basis? What sort of resources are they going to have? How about my patients? How much of a shift are they going to feel? How are we going to treat them when something goes wrong? How do we handle billing when insurances won't cover, what we're asking for them? So we sat and had a lot of conversations to see where our values were overlapping. And I will say that at the end of the day, not only did they bring forth the best price at the table, but most importantly, I felt like this is good hands to put my employees in, to put my customers, my patients in.
What's interesting, you described a lot more than just sort of the hard skill side of a business. You talked about sort of the human side of it, and how will my employees, and how will they treat the patients, and I think that's missing a lot of times. And that speaks to, I guess, the part of the value you created is that human relationships, not just with your employees, but with the customers you have too.
I worked hard for my company culture, and I think it's one of the things that they were buying. And you can't just have that destroyed by going through merger and acquisition that's going to level that out and erase that. Because at the end of the day, the team that's on the ground, my team needs to buy into the merger and acquisition. It's not a one-person show. It's about the team, and they have to be receptive to the people that are going to come in and be their new bosses. They have to be receptive to, and I can talk about what happened, also post merger and acquisition. There's a lot of transition that the team has to go through, and they have to be ready to take that on. So a merger and acquisition isn't just about a price point, and it's certainly not just about me. It's about the team being receptive and understanding that, I'm leaving my patients, my customers in the care of somebody else now. And I want to make sure that the legacy that we installed, the values that we have continue, the care that, we worked really hard to give, that there's a continuity there.
Mm-hmm. You talked a lot about, again, sort of on the human side of things, the conversations you've had over the period of this company. So you had, obviously, early conversations with your late husband. You had conversations with these other candidate buyers that you decided weren't quite a fit. You had lengthy conversations, you said over a year, with the group that eventually acquired your company. Let's talk about a conversation with yourself. So if you could go back to 2008, what is the one piece of advice you would give your younger self about preparing for this successful exit?
Oh, goodness. Set up the books for merger and acquisitions right away. You asked about what they ask for. Boy, they set up or we set up these things called data rooms. And this is really where a consultant with a banking background is a very big help. Is you want a data room and you want to present the story of your business through numbers. There's the people component, and then obviously there's the hard skills, and you have to be able to eloquently tell them, this is what happened and why. We had events like COVID. How do you represent that through, bar graphs and, P&Ls. So you have to be able to numerically really tell a story. And you do that by having fantastic books up front. And, our books, I can't complain. They're pretty good, but there was still a lack of storytelling. We still had to put tons and tons of hours into restructuring just to make sure that things were classified correctly and make sure that, most people don't know, but you can present, hey, here's our books, and I'm a business owner. So yeah, of course I write off, my car and, certain things through the business. And then here's the books without my personal, expenses on there so that they can see, okay, here's these books, just to help them understand what are the expenses that are going to be gone, once Pamina is not part of this picture. So, there's a lot, up front that I think I would have set up differently just in terms of thinking about, okay, classification in my QuickBooks. Had I done it this way, I could have just clicked one thing and it would have shown up perfectly. So I didn't have to keep going back into QuickBooks to pull different reports, reclassify things, so that it was nice and neat for them into a few categories so that it was understandable.
Actually, super great advice, because sometimes that's the last thing an entrepreneur will think of. But when you position for an acquisition, you need to have all that in order. Also, along the line, not only did you have a lot of conversations, these obviously involved a lot of people. It's interesting because you also pointed out that there were these acquirers who you weren't interested in, who weren't a right fit. So in the spirit of talking about you can never accomplish something alone, obviously talk about the people who helped you, but also what role did sort of the naysayers play, right, in prompting you to succeed?
Yeah, it is interesting that it takes many. I think for the naysayers, I kept hearing, hey, when a physician dies, the practice dies with them. And that didn't sit right with me, as a business person, it's like, no, I don't think so. If you've built a business, it should outlast even one of its founders passing. It should outlast, a pandemic.
Right.
So every time something came up, after that, we got a wonderful medical director, but he got cancer. And so it was one of these things where it's like, man, I kept having things come up. But at the end of the day, it was like, the business has to be self-sustaining. Otherwise, you did not build a business. And so it was really, those naysayers, I think, proved to me and gave me all the more gumption to go out there and say, yeah, that's nice, but I'm the exception, and I think when you have the mindset of I'm the exception and I'm going to make this work, you will rally your team. Your team will stand behind you because they know that you're a leader that's going to go out there and get it done. And you need them to do that. So I absolutely agree that those naysayers, and if anything, they gave me more drive. They gave me a reason to go out there and fight for my business.
I sensed that in your original answers earlier, that was part of the motivation, the drive. It was almost a dare,
Yeah.
Do it. Let me show you I can do it. So you talked about a lot in the area of obviously accomplishing with others. You made a great statement just now about the fact that if your business doesn't weather these storms and doesn't sustain itself, you have to build a business. That is a great tagline there. So what business is next? What opportunities are next for Pamina?
Yeah, what's interesting is, after going through this merger and acquisition, which, took forever, and it was, and I do want to say it's grueling, because you have two jobs while you're going through it. And I thought, I just need a little break, but you don't get a break because, after merger and acquisition, you go through something called an earn-out typically, where you still have, some money or some additional money on the line, and they want you to hit certain metrics. And I have I'm still an independent contractor for them where I advise and help transition. And so I've been working on that. Okay. But at the same time, I've been very blessed that I had two other companies come to me in the field, and I'm in spine, orthopedics and pain management. So, everything having to do with painful spine basically is what, the business of medicine that I've been in. Mm-hmm. And I've had two different groups now reach out to me and say, hey, we're looking for a CEO. And we think that you'd be a great fit because we want to position ourselves for an exit. You've done that. And, you've got the skill sets to grow this. So, come be with us. And so it's been very exciting. For the first time in my career now, I've sort of been elevated to this different kind of CEO where I get to step into a group that somebody else grew, and run that and take that to an exit, because now I'm very comfortable with that process. So what's next is, I will hopefully be joining one of those groups shortly and getting that going.
I almost stepped on your final words there. I apologize, but there is no other word for it but exciting. You've built not just a company, but a reputation that'll carry you on to be a blessing to other enterprises too. Our time has gone by much too fast, Pamina, but I do want to thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with all of us. It's not just exciting, it's very inspiring because there's such a bright future ahead for your continued contributions in the region. So thank you for that. And I want to thank everyone who's watching today and encourage you to also follow in Pamina's footsteps and build new great things to help all of us and help our economy. And in the meantime, best of success. Take care. Hello and welcome to Orange County Celebrates Entrepreneurs. We are highlighting some of the region's more preeminent entrepreneurs who are helping us not only improve our daily lives, but also our economy. And I'm Matthew Hanson. I'm the Director of New Ventures here at UC Irvine Beall Applied Innovation. And today's guest is Lori Torres. Lori is the former founder and CEO of Parcel, the nation's leading provider of innovative package management solutions. And in the discussion of the harvest stage of launching a company, she's going to share with us her experiences and insights regarding what it's like to be on the winning team. That is, to successfully have your company acquired and move on to the next stage of life. So welcome, Lori.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. If you could describe for us a little bit, just to set the stage, a little more about Parcel and how did you go about positioning it, or did you go about positioning it to be acquired?
Sure. So when I started the company, so first off, Parcel is electronic smart lockers to manage packages, because everybody's shopping online and all that stuff is coming in and inundating folks to, trying to manage the packages. And so I was in the apartment business for many years working at the Irvine company, and I saw this growing problem around packages. And realized there needed to be some type of solution. So our solution is that UPS, FedEx can come straight to the lockers, put in a code, send a text notification or an email that you have a parcel pending, and now you can come and pick it up at your convenience. Mm-hmm. So I started the company. I had the idea back in about 2010 when I saw the problem really mounting, and properties were asking for more headcount and bigger space because they couldn't manage all the packages at the apartment communities. And so when I decided to start the company, I, sat down, wrote a business plan, but my goal all along was to have an exit. I knew that this was not a long-term, that it wasn't going to be a family lifestyle business. It was that start the business, grow the business, sell the business. And realistically, I thought that it would happen in about 7 years. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of everyone told me when I asked advisors and folks that had been entrepreneurs and sold companies. And they said, the average is kind of 7 years. And so I had a, very strong focus of grow this company, make sure that you put everything in orders for an exit.
So in order to get it to fit an acquirer, did you have some acquirers in mind, and how did you know what they would be looking for?
You know, what's funny is originally I did have a list of some potential acquirers, and I had some folks in the apartment space that were big on technology, and I thought, they could be a candidate. I also had Amazon on the list, which is funny because at one point Amazon came to us and had a conversation and nothing went with it. But so there were, could it be a UPS? Could it be a FedEx? I doubted it because they needed to be courier agnostic. And if UPS acquired us, they probably would want just to have UPS packages go into our lockers. So, but I did start to think about, who could be the right acquirer for the company. And I thought about it early on. I mean, I remember thinking back in my early presentation deck to raise money, I had the exit strategy in place and who could possibly acquire the company.
So did you go to strategic acquirers or did you go to the investment community, the venture back?
Well, first off, we were not ready to sell. So it was 4.5 years in, and we were just saying, okay, we're probably 18 to 24 months out from selling the company. We were getting our house in order. We had to get, accounting. We'd never done a full audit. We knew that it was time to start the thought process. And we went out and interviewed attorneys and interviewed bankers. And so, I mean, we were early, but it was kind of the way I work is I do this planning and plan, and then we go. And then what happened was I would get contacted all the time from private equity, from VC money, wanting to, talk about either acquiring the money or putting an investment in. And every time my answer was, nope, heads down, running with our hair on fire, call me in a year. I was given advice from an advisor who said, don't ever talk to any of these guys if you're not ready to sell, because they'll tell your competitors that they talk to you and the word will get out on the street that your competitors will use against you that, oh, well, we heard that, Parcel Pending is looking to sell. And so I was always standard answer. I must have written that hundreds of times, head down, hair on fire, call me in a year.
But it makes it look hard to get too, right? I mean, it makes them a little more hungry if they know that they have to wait.
Yeah. And, it was interesting. People did call back a year later and I would say, still heads down running the company. And it was always my goal to grow the company to revenues. I wanted to get the company to 100 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, no, we're not there yet. And so it just kept pushing it. Like, we know it's not time yet. We know it's not time. That's why we thought the 2-year window was really not just about getting our house in order, but it was also about getting to the revenue that we were trying to achieve. And so, but funny, when the strategic investor came by and, which was Neopost at the time, they've changed their name to Quadient, the folks that purchased us, when they came along, same conversation, same email, heads down, run a hair on fire. And they said, no, we're serious. We want to talk to you. We have tried to get into the US. We can't get in and we want to talk about an acquisition. So I always say, if you can't beat them, buy them. And so I think that's the mentality that they had. So I said, all right, we'll talk to you. And, but I really wasn't interested in talking to them. And I felt like it was too early. Mm-hmm. And then they came out from France and poor guys, when they met with us the first day, like the first minutes at the table, I said, look, it's too early to sell this company. We're not going to get the valuation. I am a businesswoman. I understand I'm not going to get the valuation that I want. Mm-hmm. And they said, listen, we are here to make an investment. We want to be in the United States. You're a great partner for us. You would be a great partner for us because how many systems you've already been able to get out in the marketplace. And so, so it really was a perfect match, and timing was earlier than I expected. Everything happened very fast, but it ended up being a great story.
By this point, if you can share, what was your revenue, and were you nationwide? What was this?
We were nationwide and in Canada. I think back then, this was in 2019 when we closed the deal. We were, I don't know, probably 4,000 systems, properties. I can't remember the exact number, maybe 3,000. It's funny how you forget those things. At the time, you never forget it. And so our revenue was about $30 million. And so we had done that fast, to be 4.5 years in and be at 30 million was pretty good. And we'd had nice growth every year, pretty significant growth. And so I thought we could continue to do that growth. And I was really trying to take us from being just in multifamily apartments to get us into retail and to other verticals, student universities, commercial. And so I knew that there was a big opportunity. And so when they came knocking, I just said, it's not time because our revenues are too low and the valuation is not going to make sense. But they wanted us.
I have to ask, by this point, have you run into some of your lockers at locations? Have you
All the time. Oh yeah. I get emails all the time from people like an early employee and an investor in the company just sent me an email last week and he said, hey, my daughter Ari is at this university and she just got an email to sign up for Parcel Pending.
Very nice. Very nice.
Because now Parcel Pending has about 7,500 locations now across the nation and Canada. They launched in the UK and France. And then a great deal that we did before I left, because I just recently left in August after we closed the deal, the sale, and then I stayed 2.5 years and then I've left. And we did the Lowe's home improvement deal and we were able to put in 1,700 plus locations of our lockers. So if anyone goes into a Lowe's home improvement, you'll see our lockers. So for buy online, pick up in store.
I guess I've seen them then because I've seen the lockers.
Yeah.
Very good. So when you decided to do the deal, you would have to go through due diligence, of course, which there's often a lot of sad horror stories about that process. Can you describe what it's like to go through due diligence and the process by which an acquirer determines, are you really a fit for them?
Yeah, so it was so there was a motivation at the time, Neopost on their end to close the deal very fast. And so they came to us and said, and I kept stalling them, which I was like, it's that head down, hair on fire conversation. And so they wanted to come out and I was like, yeah. They're like, get us an NDA. Yeah. And I kept stalling it. And finally they're like, we're serious. We need to come out. It's December. We want to meet with you. And then once we met and they were interested, they wanted to close by January 22nd. So our deal happened so fast. Wow. And which is not the norm. Thank God, because I like things to move fast. I talk fast. I move fast. We grew the business fast. We raised money fast. All those kind of things have happened. The whole story of Parcel Pending. And so they said, would you be able to commit to a close that fast? And we said, yeah, we can bring in some resources. We can make it happen. And they said, but we won't go through full due diligence. We'll kind of do a light due diligence. They brought in EY. Who does light due diligence when you bring in EY? It was not light. The bankers actually said to us, there were times the banker said, this is more intense than a full due diligence that we've seen. They're asking for more than what we've seen in, deals that take 6, 9, 12 months to close. So it was intense. It was fun. It was crazy. I remember sleepless nights, and every morning we had a 5 a.m. call. Our attorney was in New York. And so every morning there'd be a call with the French team, and it was insane. But I don't know that I'd have it any other way. I think it worked out really well.
Did you get a trip to France?
I did not. Can you believe it? Here's the deal. What? When you're in Irvine, California, everyone wants to come to Irvine.
Okay.
So nobody is inviting me to France. So to this day, I have not been. So I sold the company 2.5 years ago. Never got invited to France, and because everyone wanted to come out here whenever there was.
Did you say the deal was closing in the winter anyways, like December or something? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it closed January 2019.
Out here, okay, I understand that.
Yeah, so they brought their whole team out here. They brought their accountants. Everybody came this way because it's so beautiful here.
So you got a lot of advice early on about how long it would take, sort of strategies you should use. If you were now advising your younger self 10 years ago, what would be the one piece of advice that you would be sure to share with yourself back then in terms of setting your company up to be acquired?
Yeah, I think it's advice that I had gotten, which was, have a plan, focus on the plan, and execute on the plan. And that's really what we did. And, some entrepreneurs don't believe in it. They don't put together a business plan. They don't put together a budget. I came from the real estate industry where every year we wrote budgets on every property had a budget. The company had a budget, analytics all the time. So I kept that same discipline. And I will tell you that is what helped, that anytime we got off course, it was like, okay, what's the plan? Where are we going? And you easily can get distracted. New product can come in, or new verticals, new opportunities come up. And it's like, okay, is this in alignment? Is this what the plan is? Mm-hmm. And so for me, I would say that was the best advice I got. And the advice I'd give myself if I started another company again is I'd go the exact same path, have a plan in place. I did not spend $1. I didn't even name the company until I had written a full 3-year plan. I'd done a 3-year forecasting. I had 2 different CFOs review the numbers to make sure if I really had something, because why go spend money if I don't have something? And I talked to so many entrepreneurs that tell me that they're this far along. And I'm like, okay, well, what's your plan? How much revenue do you want to make this year? I don't know. It's in my head. And I'm like, no, I don't think for me, it doesn't work.
Well, you had the advantage that a lot of entrepreneurs didn't have, which was over a decade of experience in the very industry that you saw a need in. So you brought a wealth of knowledge and experience and expectations into this that a lot of founders wouldn't have. And so given that as part of your background too, and successfully achieving this exit, can you describe for us what it was like when it closed? I mean, what were the feelings, both personal and professional, you had about yourself, your team? Just walk us through that human experience.
Yeah. But before I do that, I do want to say something, because on that comment of my experience, and I had this background, which I did, I was very fortunate, but I also, I kind of grew up in corporate America. I didn't have any entrepreneurial experience whatsoever. I never raised money. I never, we jokingly said when we needed money at the Irvine company, we just went to the basement and, got cash. Not true, but we did say it. But so I had to go and find advisors that could help me. I mean, I had no experience in technology. I had no experience in manufacturing. I knew enough to be dangerous about all of it, and because of my past experience, but the key was finding advisors that will help you. And I was blown away how many people would help me. And I've been so fortunate to have some pretty amazing people that came into my life during Parcel Pending years to help with the company. And so I think that's really important. So when the company closed, it was, a bag of emotions for sure. It was really a cool experience. The day of the close, it was hairy because there was like a few final issues that had around insurance or something that hadn't gotten finalized, and we're waiting. And I had called an all hands staff meeting to tell the company that, all the associates that we'd sold the company. And so we kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And finally I announced it, and the deal wasn't done. And I said, this is really awkward, but I'm going to announce it, but we aren't done. The money hasn't wired, but I knew it was going to. I didn't feel like it wouldn't, although it was a little hairy at the end. Yeah. But I have to say I couldn't have done it on my own. And so every single employee at Parcel Pending got to participate in some kind of compensation at the exit. So whether it was and no one had fully, their options hadn't fully vested because we hadn't had the company long enough. And so I vested a lot of people, other people, if you had even been there 2 weeks, a week, a day, you got a little check. And I felt very strongly that it wasn't Lori Torres who got us to the exit. It was the team that got us to the exit. And had we not had this amazing team and this really phenomenal culture that really felt, I don't know. I didn't set out to have it feel like this family-like experience, and how can you possibly have, at the time, I think we had 180 associates. How can 180 associates feel like a family? But it did. It felt like, we made tough calls. We terminated when we needed to. We promoted a lot of people, but it just felt like we had this open communication that we all got there together. And it was great because early on, we'd be at an all hands staff meeting and someone would raise their hand and say, hey, when are we going to get raises? Or when are you going to get 401 contributions? And I'm like, hey, when are you? You own part of this company. You have stock options. And so I felt like the team was so vested that it was us going after it, and we did it together. And so when we sold it, it was such an awesome experience.
I can imagine. And it's clear, even though that was a while ago, you're still sort of in the glow of that effect. In 30 seconds, what's next for Lori Torres?
Well, so I've been a workaholic my entire life. And I really, during Parcel Pending, I worked like mad. And so I've decided to give myself at least 6 months and take a pause. I've been traveling and really enjoying life. And then, I don't know. I don't have a great idea. And so I'm going to spend my time and energy helping other entrepreneurs. And so as people end up reaching out to me, I hear from a lot of folks, and I'll give my time whenever. And I like doing that. And a lot of times I can't help, but I can maybe give references or, a referral here or there. And so there were so many people that helped me along the way to be successful that I want to be able to give back and do the same for others. And then we'll see. I don't know. I may just ride into the sunset, or I might start another company. I don't know.
Well, it's good. It's keep your options open. Yeah. And just like you described, everything in the path of Parcel Pending went faster than expected. So did this interview. So for sharing really some wonderful highlights, all very not just informational, but inspirational. I want to thank you for that and wish you best of success, and hope to see more of Lori Torres out and about.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Matthew Hanson. I'm the Director of New Ventures at UC Irvine Beall Applied Innovation. And this is Orange County Celebrates Entrepreneurs, where we're putting a spotlight on some of the exceptional entrepreneurs from our region. And today's exceptional entrepreneur is Kayvan Baroumand. And Kayvan is the founder and CEO of Innowise. But in the context of the strategies that we're talking about in this section, exit strategies, he's going to share with us his insights, experience, and lessons learned in the area of having and executing an exit strategy. So welcome, Kayvan.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks.
Let's just dive right in and describe the organization you founded, GSV Labs, and how you positioned it for an acquisition or an exit. And did you actually think about that at the beginning, or is this something that evolved over time?
Yeah, so, GSV Labs was an organization that I founded back in 2011, 2012 timeframe. And the whole purpose, prior to that, I was a founding COO of an organization called Plug and Play Tech Center. And Plug and Play today is the world's largest incubator, innovation center with about 40 locations around the world. And I left Plug and Play not because things were bad, but because I wanted a challenge. And the CEO of Plug and Play is still, who's a very dear friend of mine. He's only a couple of years older than me, and I didn't see him going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, he's still running the organization. And for me, there was some things that I wanted to do a little differently. And so with the blessing of my wife, I said, you know what, let's start this new venture. And so that's when we started GSV Labs. So the purpose of GSV Labs was to build an ecosystem that included, startups, governments, universities, and large corporations, with the idea that, big problems facing society today basically needed the collaboration of those entities. Mm-hmm. And therefore I created GSV Labs, the Golden Silicon Valley. The global Silicon Valley is really what it stands for. Mm-hmm. And we went to town. So I looked for a large campus, and I ended up finding a facility which was the old at-home headquarters, which is another, successful Silicon Valley entity, mm-hmm. but this time was owned by Stanford University. And so I basically then started talking to some of my friends, And I was fortunate enough to have, being located here in Silicon Valley and doing what I did and living where I lived, I had a lot of friends who were very successful as entrepreneurs, as investors here in the Valley. So for me, the fundraising process literally, and I'm not saying this to brag, but was a very simple process. Literally, I would, share with them what I did, and they just say, "How much money do you want?"
I'd like to meet them.
Yeah, as I said, it's not your typical story. And through that process, I also met a CEO of a company, of a private equity group. And the same thing, I was introduced to him. I did not know him, however. And, but as soon as he saw what I was doing, he said, Kayvan, this is very strategic. They had a publicly traded fund, a $300 million fund where they invested in education companies, ed tech investors. And they had a big, event called the Global Education Summit that was in a partnership with Arizona State. So we end up going, doing a partnership, and they end up becoming a lead investor. In fact, unfortunately or fortunately, I raised more money than I really originally anticipated to have. And as a result, we actually created two entities. One entity was a holding company, and then the other entity was the operating entity. And so my friends who had invested in the operating entity basically, were that group. And then the private equity group was the sole investor in the holding company, with the idea that as we would build different innovation centers around the world, that holding company would be the bond, the tie that would connect all these entities together. Because we wanted to build a globally connected network of innovation centers.
You said fundraising was easy, but parts of this must have been hard. There must have been painful lessons learned along the way of not just growing GSP Labs, but of setting it up for the acquisition. Can you describe some of those?
So when I say the fundraising was easy, I think it was easy because I was extremely prepared. Number one, I knew, I had a successful track record. Number two, I had financials that I used based on previous experience. So I kind of knew, exactly how I was going to start this entity, what the growth rate would be, who I needed to hire, how I needed to hire, and so forth. So from that perspective, it was easy because I was extremely prepared, and they could see that.
Yeah.
And when it came to as far as what my plan was for the exit, I knew when you deal with a private equity company that at the end of the day, there is that balance of when they think it's optimal to acquire that asset, or that investment. But we did not necessarily talk when. So the when piece was something that, I figured it would happen down the road at some point. But at what date, we didn't know. I figured it was going to be a, 7 to 10 year journey. It happened a little sooner, and I'll explain that also.
Well, please do. Please continue. Talk about some of the barriers you had to overcome, or roadblocks or setbacks, and then how did that end up actually going a little faster than planned?
Sure. So one thing, as I learned, through this journey, was that when you're dealing with private equity people, it's all about the numbers, right? And the startup. And when you're dealing with a startup, it's really about blocking and tackling obstacles, so to speak. Now, even though I had experience building a similar organization, but yet still I wanted to be different. as I look back at it, I was more of a startup than I was a later stage company. So I had these expectations that were set of me to be more like a established, mature operating entity, and at the same time having to do the blocking and tackling and doing the, having the challenges any startup has when you start a new venture, and so one is, you're dealing with an incumbent that is, very well established, that has a very big brand. And so, for me, I was trying to get to that level that I had built and plug and play in a shorter period of time. And at the same time, I had board members that were used to dealing with more mature companies. And so I figured that was one part of the biggest challenges that I had. And so one of the lessons that I learned is when you're a startup, have board members that understand the challenges of a startup and not necessarily micromanaging the details of the financials. The financials are always important, in any organization, but to a private equity firm, they're even more important, because what they're trying to figure out is what is the optimal time and how could they, leverage what their skill set is, and is to take this company to the next level, right? And to control it the way they want to control it. And so as we were building our board, I had, some people that were big company board members and less of the people that were, understanding the pains and challenges that a young startup has.
So
I would say,
as you navigated all this and got some insights and guidance from others on the outside, I'm reminded that an entrepreneur, when they dive into things, there's a whole lot that's undefined. A lot of the decisions you're faced with ambiguity. You're flying by the seat of your pants a little bit. I like the phrase you used, blocking and tackling. So all of this is kind of a learning experience, right? So if you were to go back to the day that you first conceived GSV Labs, what's the one thing you would tell your younger self?
Be patient. Be patient, because a startup, and I said, I had many things that I was trying to achieve. Number one, I wanted to get to the same level as my previous company that I was a founding CEO of. And so everything I did, that was my benchmark. That was the organization I was always trying to look forward to. And what I also realized is that when you're in this business, what I thought was going to be important, at those times, are not necessarily as important today. So the needs of the market changes. So that's one thing I did realize, and so I very quickly, made those sort of adjustments in terms of, okay, what I thought was needed, is no longer needed as much. And so now I got to focus on those type of things, which changed the model a little bit, but it changed the model for the better, so to speak. And we were able to create even more differentiation.
Give me just a little bit.
So I would say number one.
No, go ahead, please.
Go ahead. I was going to say, so the two lessons learned is that be patient. And number two, what you want to do is adapt with the needs of the market.
Excellent points. So in doing those two things, you actually had a unique exit opportunity. That is, you didn't need to choose between the several harvest strategies of selling to management, selling to employees, selling to a strategic partner, et cetera. You actually sold into the family, so to speak. It was your investment partner in GSV that was the acquirer. So you really only had one path. Is that true?
I had one easy path. I could have been in a situation where, if I wanted to, I could have minimized the their influence on the organization if I wanted to. But quite frankly, I was really so much focused on building a global platform that I just, and they were supporting me in such a way. They said, Kayvan, we don't want you to worry about fundraising, right? Don't worry about that. We've got your back. Go build the business. And so that's a double-edged sword, so to speak, especially when you deal with private equity, because they're saying, Kayvan, don't bring outsiders in. We want to have control of the company, which ultimately meant that I had no choice at the end except to sell it to GSV Labs.
Right.
So, that was kind of the double-edged sword where I ultimately knew that they're going to be my ultimate acquirer. And at some point, the control of the organization was going to become more theirs than mine.
Right.
And that happens, by the way, in any early stage company. Early stage companies, typically as they grow, the founder, and typically maybe the founder and the CEO, as they bring on more investors, they have less and less control, ultimately lose control of the board. And in the most cases, they get replaced by a CEO that is used to scaling the company and not, the blocking and tackling CEO that, so to speak.
No, good distinction between those two. You're right. So you had a successful exit. You are now the founder and CEO of Innowise. So what's next for Kayvan?
Yeah, so with Innowise, I'm really taking the model. The biggest difference between Innowise and GSV Labs, which is now called One Valley, is this whole digital transformation that's happened, right? And that here I am speaking to you in Irvine, and I actually do a lot of business in Orange County. 7 or 8 years ago, that would not have been as easy, so to speak, or as acceptable. But to answer what's next for Kayvan, ultimately, we're growing Innowise. We want to work closer with universities. And we're also putting together a fintech company for the investment piece of it. So we've identified kind of a gap in this whole in the private company ecosystem, and so we are creating a fund of sort that allows us to invest in the top companies that are basically been identified as pre-unicorns, and working with the top investors who have invested in those unicorns through an SPV. So what we're doing is combining this whole investment model with Innowise, and that's what I'm really looking forward to.
That's really exciting. I got to tell you, it's interesting to watch your success up in the past, but also this sort of innovative approach going forward on building sort of the next generation of what you've always had in your heart, is a sort of a global approach to things. Kayvan, I want to thank you very much for sharing your insights and experiences, and particularly your lessons learned with us. I think it's to be a lot of help, not just to entrepreneurs out there watching, but also to anyone who's inspired to try something new. So on behalf of Orange County Celebrates Entrepreneurs, thank you again. And for everybody out there, thank you for watching, and best of success. Take care.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Matthew Hanson. I'm the Director of New Ventures here at UC Irvine Beall Applied Innovation. And this is Orange County Celebrates Entrepreneurs, where we're shining a spotlight on some of the region's more exceptional entrepreneurs who are helping to improve our daily life as well as our economy. And today's exceptional entrepreneur is John Shen, CEO of American Lending Centers. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So in the context of the harvest or exit stage, you're going to share with us a pretty unique story, because I've even referred to you early on as a serial entrepreneur, but in truth, you're a parallel entrepreneur, much like Elon Musk or others, in that you started companies but never actually exited them. You've actually built more companies in parallel. And while you do transition, obviously, the day-to-day operations to key staff, you're still hands-on and you're still growing these companies. The other aspect that's unique to your situation is that you're growing these organically. So you don't have investors who have a time clock for exit. So this is a fascinating story. I'm looking forward to getting into this. So in terms of what's next, talk about this approach to launching multiple companies. Was this part of your original plan? Did this sort of evolve over time? Can you walk us through that?
Yes, I didn't have this plan at the very beginning. I started my first business, American Lending Center, back in 2009. I was able to build that business from zero to a pretty successful business today. We're on track to achieve I believe over 70 million EBITDA, and 1.1 billion AUM, and over 100,000 domestic and international clients and customers this year.
Amazing.
But I was able to launch my second and third and fourth business in the last few years. As you said, I mean, this is a unique situation. But I don't think parallel entrepreneurship is so strange. A lot of people are doing that right now. But you have to make sure that you understand how you create the new businesses at the right timing.
Mm-hmm. So this wasn't part of our original plan. They're sort of an evolution of you and your businesses. Is one related to the next?
It's an interesting question. So how do you start your second business? Are you ready to start a second business? I think the easiest way to start a second business is to leverage the power of the people in your first business. We're talking about, your customers, your business partners, and your employees. So when you build, for example, if you already build a mature business, you have a decent cash flow. Now you have a fascinating idea to start your second business, maybe in a different sector. I think you probably have to ask a few questions to yourself. Questions like, first of all, would your current customers be happy to accept a different set of products or services from you? Mm-hmm. And secondly, is there a strong motivation for some of your business partners to establish a new relationship with you? And lastly, are you going to confuse or maybe distract your employees when you bring in the new community? Now, if you feel comfortable with the answers of all these questions, I think you can go ahead. Otherwise, you might want to think twice.
Excellent point. I love the fact that you touched on all those kind of stakeholders, because they all have to be in agreement for the whole idea to work, which now that you've done this, I guess, 2 or 3 times, you're sort of honing that whole model. But in the idea that you're growing these organically, let's talk about that, because I would think that more capital resources would allow you to grow faster and maybe go into other directions. Why did you choose an organic path?
Well, you're absolutely right, Matt. If I look back, my first business, American Lending Center, would have grown faster with more capital resources.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes, if you're unable to raise capital, or for whatever reason your business is not that attractive to investors, you may have to deal with growth, organic growth. Okay, so that's what you have to deal with. A lot of small businesses have to deal with that. The key for that, I think, is that you have to focus on building internal cash flow. Once you have some revenue, make sure you reinvest the money into your business,
Mm-hmm.
money back to where the business needs the most. If you keep doing that, stay patient for a number of years, I think you have a great chance to succeed.
Did you leverage any funds from one company to start the next? So were you an investor in your own growth in these other companies?
Yes and no. Yes, because for any startups, you got a little capital to burn at very beginning, especially when you hire people. So my first business, when we had good cash flow, good income, we were able to use part of that to launch the second business. Same thing happened for the third and fourth business. But no, because you want all these businesses to grow independently. You don't want to keep everybody on the same umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
So at a certain stage, you're able to maybe raise capital for your newer businesses. You should do that.
When you started your second and third companies, did you have to dilute your participation in the earlier ones? That is, turn over more control to trusted agents, if you will. Again, not in the sense of an exit, but clearly in the sense of sort of a handoff or distributing the management tasks.
So like I said, my first business started back in 2009. Second business started in 2015, 6 years ago.
Okay.
I think it's important to keep in mind that when you start launching new businesses, you got to hire new leaders. In a certain way, you need to step back and let somebody else drive the business.
So we talked about your decision to go organic and the purpose or the importance of capital resources. You've migrated to my next topic, actually, which is the human resources. So clearly, when you need to expand not just one company, but multiple ones, where do you go to find this talent?
It's a challenge, Matt. Top talents never come to startups automatically. And oftentimes we have to settle with hiring the entry-level people because unfortunately, those are the only people we can afford.
Hmm.
So it's hard to hire top talents. Have to get ready to develop talents.
Do you do that from like borrowing talent from your existing companies? Do you have to wait till you have talent before you decided to launch a new one? How did that play out?
So these are specific situations. Your employees for the second business could come from your first business. You could hire some new people. I think it's a combination of those two.
Okay.
But the key is when you talk to these people, you need to make sure that they believe in the value of this business, buy into your vision.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important thing. And that's why they are motivated to come into your new business and, you know, stay in the business and work for you, hopefully for a number of years.
So you've mentioned American Lending Centers, then you started another one just 6 years ago. Can you share with us the several companies that you have now, and when did they start?
Yes, I started my second company, Sandstone Management, back in 2015. Unlike American Lending Center, this is another type of financial service company. And Sandstone Management offers private equity venture capital investment opportunities for its clients. I started the third company, which is a Sandstone Trust Company, 4 years ago. And early this year, we received the trust license from California. And, you know, we're happy to get the license because this is the only license issued by the government in the past 15 years.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's a unique business, offers the trustee services to, you know, trust clients, corporate. My last business is an interesting, innovative concept. The business name is called Partake Collective. It's a concept evolved from Ghost Kitchen. Ghost Kitchen is an interesting facility where, you know, the food, drink, you know, business can cook the food, but, you know, usually you don't have a dine-in traffic,
right,
all your food online. And when you have a chance to build a property, maybe a big facility that hosts the multiple kitchen units, you're able to bring in a lot of business to your facility. And that's the concept.
That is so different from your other financial companies. That must have been a little bit risky feeling, no?
Yes, it's a little bit different, but I like the concept. I think it's the idea that, you know, gives me a lot of motivation to do this business, because I really think this is one of the biggest opportunities in the next decade.
It's interesting, too. I made an analogy early on to Elon Musk and parallel entrepreneurs. He clearly went into different businesses, too. So this curiosity about opportunities in different industries is another area which I wish we had time to pursue, but one we should make a point of. Where you are in your career now, if you were to go back to the start, when you started American Lending Centers, what would you tell your younger self? What is the one thing you would tell yourself that you think would make the next several years easier, more fun, more profitable, whatever was important to you?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned over the years is that you have to look for you know, a long-term goal. To be able to build a sustainable business. So you know, if I were able to you know, younger myself 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you know, I would say, you know, never shortcut. Just build your business one step at a time. Be patient. Always look for long-term achievements.
It's a fascinating approach, because obviously so many of us look for that short-term gain and not always cut corners, but sometimes try to find the easier way rather than the more difficult way that in the long run will pay out even better. And not just financially, but also in the sort of the personal rewards and the values you want to create. So that would be you going in the past. What about John Shen looking forward? What's next for you?
Well, I always look for the next couple of years. You know, this is I would say if you look at the next 5 years, will likely a exit for my first business.
Oh, okay.
because American Lending Center, by the way, has been approached by some interesting strategic acquirers in the past.
Oh, excellent.
So I think the trend will continue. So at a certain point, we may be able to do some deal and complete an exit for my first business.
I see.
We are at this point, we're transitioning most of our second business operation to the third business operation.
Oh.
Kind of combining two business into one. And I think the last business in the 5 years will have a great opportunity to grow fast.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of exciting opportunities waiting.
Well, exciting is really the word for it, isn't it? John, I want to thank you for spending time today, but more importantly, for sharing your insights and your experiences with us. Very inspiring. And on that point, I want to thank all those watching and listening, but also encourage you to model people like John in taking the risks, putting yourself out there, growing great opportunities for other people as well as yourself, and generally contributing to the betterment of society and all of us. So thank you for that, John. Look forward to more success from you.
Great. I feel excited because I'm moving my businesses from Long Beach to Irvine in just a couple of weeks. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely. All right. Take care now, everybody.
Bye-bye.